We often make the assumption that if something is the biggest or the oldest, it should be trusted, or it wouldn't have grown so large. But when it comes to cryptocurrency, this may not always be true. Today's guest is Aaron Lammer. Aaron is the founder of Treats Media, which produces original podcasts and work for clients. Original works include the critically acclaimed miniseries Exit Scam and multiple seasons of Stoner and CoinTalk. Aaron is also the co-founder of Longform.com and host of the Longform Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey Podcast. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey Podcast today.
Very happy to be here.
So I'm really excited. I've just started to listen to your podcast about exit scams, or at least exit scam. I don't know. Are you going to do a second season?
We'll see. It hasn't taken long for history to repeat itself, so there's plenty of opportunities for more to document.
Okay, this will be awesome. So let's talk about what is a cryptocurrency. Let's limit our discussion to cryptocurrency exit scams for the time being. So, what is a cryptocurrency exit scam?
Well, I think if you've heard about a large amount of money being lost in crypto, very often the story will be that someone got hacked, an exchange got hacked, and therefore doesn't have the customer's money. And in a lot of these scenarios that have played out over the last half decade or so, it's later been clear that maybe the exchange wasn't hacked by external forces, but in fact, insiders either took the money or had previously taken the money and lost it in some ways. And the hacking is actually a false narrative to escape the consequences of either a theft or a loss of funds. Sometimes they really are hacked. And then the founders usually disappear with the money and, make various excuses about why they can't give people their money and, very rarely face consequences, honestly, for doing so, because the legality of this stuff across different jurisdictions is very different. But if there's one common theme, it's that there isn't a ton of enforcement for stealing people's money if it's in cryptocurrencies. In fact, most legal systems are not really prepared to deal with cases like this very effectively. So what ends up happening is, there's jurisdictions in the Caribbean where you're unlikely to get extradited back to the U.S. for a shaky case of stealing from your own exchange. It ends up being a pretty high risk to reward crime for people who are involved in cryptocurrency. And if there's sort of a new twist on the old theme, because exit scams go back hundreds of years, there's 1800s exit scams we could talk about. But the cryptocurrency twist, I think, is that it's very easy to literally disappear with the money now. But ironically, because of the way the blockchain works, people coming after you can kind of see where a lot of the money went. And in the case of Quadriga, which I've spent the last couple of years looking into, it was very difficult to figure out what happened to the co-founder who disappeared. But I'm much more confident about what happened to the money he embezzled because the evidence is on the blockchain.
So let's talk about who was Quadriga, how long was it around, and what happened with it?
So it was the largest exchange in Canada when it still existed. It was run by a guy named Gerald Cotton, who founded it when he was 25 years old with another guy. And by the end of his time at Quadriga, he was basically running the exchange as a one-man band, although it's unclear whether his customers were really aware of that. And he took a honeymoon trip to India with his new wife and got sick very rapidly. He had Crohn's disease, and he died, or at least the official narrative is that he died in Jaipur in December 2018. And then after he died, various suspicious things came out that led people to doubt some elements of that official story.
And so, if I remember right, the amount of money that, or the amount of crypto that disappeared was around 250 million,
Yeah, I think, it depends
give or
whether
take.
it's dollars or Canadian dollars, but it's between 2 and $250 million at the prices in December 2018. Now, for anyone who's followed what's happened to crypto since 2018, that's in the billions now. So one of the sort of tragic elements of frauds like this is that the money people lost, as denominated in Bitcoin or Ether, just keeps scaling up over time.
So, someone who several years ago lost $100,000, it would have been, depending on which currency it was, $1 million now or several $1 million now.
Yeah, and the people who lost money on Quadriga are trying to fight just to get back pennies on the dollar of what they had in there, and simultaneously the amount that they would have had is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and I assume the only ones who are really getting money back are the lawyers who are dealing with the whole scenario.
I won't personally comment, but I will say that is a sentiment I've heard from many customers who lost money. I will say, for my part, that the people who were brought in, who were not criminal investigators, but were forensic accountants, they were hired by lawyers. They're Ernst and Young. They found a lot of stuff. To their credit, they probably figured this out far more than anyone else. Basically using the only clues being like the financial records of what had happened at Quadriga, and they were able to sort of reverse engineer a lot of the story, literally like seeing how money flowed out from the exchange into the founders' pockets.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Of how does a one-man band run an operation that has, in theory, $250 million of assets, and kind of nobody seemed to realize that it's just one guy?
I mean, I think this kind of speaks to the internet as a whole, that people don't really know how the sausage they're consuming is made. And the people who did know Gerald Cotton were kind of convinced by him. He kind of resembled, I think, what they expected a tech guru to be. He was a young guy. He looked younger than he was. He was good at talking about Bitcoin, and he was Canadian. And, I don't mean to generalize, but a lot of Canadians told me that one reason they trusted him was that he was Canadian and that it was a Canadian exchange. And there's this other thing, that crypto is so new, that another reason people told me they trusted Quadriga was that it was the oldest Bitcoin exchange in Canada. Now, it was only a few years old, but it's hard to explain to someone outside crypto, but it actually looked less sketchy than its competitors, which were even newer than it.
I mean, that makes sense. In any industry, people are going to tend to gravitate to the organizations that have been around the longest, that seem to have a track record. When it's emerging technology, 3 years is a lifetime.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? When you become the biggest exchange, you become the most trusted exchange, because people must have trusted you to make you the biggest exchange. Now, one thing I did learn in investigating this story is that Gerald Cotton, the founder, was using fake sock puppet accounts to trade with his own customers. Those sock puppet accounts accounted for, at times, more than 30% of the volume on the exchange. So even the idea that it was the largest exchange, which made people trust it, was itself a kind of a piece of theater. He was, especially early in the life of Quadriga, faking a tremendous amount of the volume that itself made the exchange look legit.
So for clarity on the listeners, do you mean, and for myself, so do you mean that when he was he was the buyer and the seller for a whole bunch of transactions to make it look like there were a bunch more transactions than there really were?
I mean, often actually he was only the buyer. So he was just taking money and basically buying Bitcoin from his customers and Ethereum using fake funds. So he would credit himself with Canadian dollars in these fake accounts and then buy real crypto, which moved real crypto into his account and fake Canadian dollars that he couldn't actually pay out in a bank run into their accounts, and it simulated fake volume. And actually, Quadriga was known within cryptocurrencies for having high prices paid for Bitcoin. People would use arbitrage to trade on Quadriga because it consistently had a higher price for Bitcoin than other exchanges. Well, we now know why. There was a guy who would always buy Bitcoin and would always want to buy more Bitcoin, even as people asked for more money for the Bitcoin. So all of these weird mysteries about Quadriga have an actual rational explanation, and there was a guy in the background sort of playing all of the strings, puppeteering basically what was happening on the exchange.
So has it ever been confirmed to be an exit scam, or is there still the possibility, like whether or not his death was real or faked or not? Does the exchange itself look to be a Ponzi scheme?
I would say that whether Gerald Cotton is still alive or not is tangential to the fact that he was running an active multi-year fraud that has a lot of the hallmarks of a Ponzi scheme on his customers. And I think his plan was always to do that. Like, he very much set things up that way from early on. He had experience running Ponzi schemes as a teenager. And these Ponzi schemes end very similarly to how Quadriga ends, which he said, oh, I was invested in this other, they were called high yield investment programs. He's like, my high yield investment program was actually just invested in this other high yield investment program, and they got seized. So you lost your money, but I'm going to try to pay people back by doing another high yield investment program, right?
I invested in a scam, and that scam fell through, so I'm going to invest in another scam to pay you back for the scam that you're currently involved in.
This is a trademark late Ponzi move, which is to basically rehook people to say, hey, if you just wait a little longer and you don't report me, if you just maybe put in a little bit more money, I have another way that I can get back all of the money. And so he was running these over time. Quadriga itself resembles one of these schemes where at the end he had leached so many funds out that he would have to wait to pay out withdrawals for people to deposit. I mean, this is a classic end game of a Ponzi scheme, which is that the outflow can never exceed the inflow, and that when the inflow starts getting throttled and more people want to pull money out, which is what happens during a crypto crash. When crypto's going up, everyone wants to put money into an exchange. When crypto crashes, everyone wants to pull their money out of the exchange. So this is what happened in early 2018, and probably caused a pretty catastrophic situation at Quadriga, which would have put him very close to being revealed as running a fractional reserve that couldn't pay out its debts.
Yeah, that's particularly scary when it's things that people, it's it's a quote unquote, I'll do air quotes, it's an investment that people don't really most people really probably don't understand.
There's also this strange layer where the Bitcoin and the Ethereum are one thing, and they're supposed to be there, and in this case, they're not. But there's always, with an exchange, dollars. I mean, in the case of Canadians, Canadian dollars, right? People have to sell their Bitcoin for dollars to get out, and they need to put in dollars to buy Bitcoin in the first place. So a big chunk of what an exchange is holding is actually going to be dollars. And those, it's very sketchy where those are at any given period of time. They theoretically should be sitting in a bank account, but we know that most banks won't deal with Bitcoin exchanges. So, it becomes, well, nowadays stable coins have in some ways filled that realm, but for a long time, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors as to where money that was supposed to be there in dollar form really was. And that continues with Tether and various other crypto fires waiting to happen, where, there's a bunch of digital dollars that are supposed to be somewhere represented in a bank account with actual money.
So did the investigators kind of figure out where all the money went? Were they the ones who figured out that he was effectively just kind of printing his own money to buy currency from people?
Yeah, I mean, they were able to trace a pretty good portion of the money that he actually took out and put onto other exchanges, some of which he gambled and lost on large leveraged trades, some of which he actually cashed out and bought a lot of houses in Canada. But beyond that, there was another sum of money that was kind of mysterious, where it was like, okay, we located like half the money, but half the money is kind of outstanding. And that's one of the reasons people think he might be alive, is that there's, this kind of unaccounted for chunk of money that someone could have. One of our last episodes kind of addresses that money, and I won't spoiler it for people who aren't too far along, but don't get your hopes up that a lifelong scammer somehow has saved a bunch of the money. I think the outcome is more to someone like you who follows stories like this. You're probably in the back of your mind going, I bet that money isn't still around,
And I suspect even if it was, it's not going to be accessible. If he really did die, it doesn't really matter whether it exists or not. No one's going to be able to touch it.
Yeah, I mean, the theme of this story is a person who could have been rich simply by being involved in cryptocurrency in the first place very early, but tried to shoot the moon by both stealing his customers' money and far more so making huge bets with his customers' money. So when you asked, was it an exit scam? I think the optimistic read was basically placing a bet that was most of his customers' money on the cryptocurrency markets. If that bet had hit, he could have paid everyone out and been billionaire rich. Sadly, that bet did not hit.
And that seems to be a common theme with Ponzi schemes, is the person who's running it is, well, if I just make this one bet and it goes through, I'm the hero that I've been appeared to be for so long, I will now actually be, because the funds will be there to support the withdrawals.
I would say that's the most common theme across different exit scams I've heard of, that the take that is the most generous to the person is that it was a form of gambling gone wrong.
Yeah. And do you know what the total final payout, cents on the dollar it is for the investors or the account holders?
I think that they've found around $40 million. This was money that was being held by payment processors that hadn't gone, and the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce had frozen about $26 million of his money. Now, I don't think $40 million will be going back to the customers. I know the legal fees we've already addressed the legal fees. So, yeah, I mean, not only is it a small amount of money, but it's, been years, and it will probably be more years before any of this gets tied up.
Yeah, I mean, the best case scenario, that's 15 cents of the dollar, assuming the lawyers and the forensic analysts don't get anything.
Yeah,
and I
pretty
think
much.
And I think if I remember right, like Bernie Madoff, who's considered one of the largest Ponzi schemes, they were actually able to get back a significantly large portion of the funds. That it wasn't, while it was a Ponzi scheme, the money was actually still out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
He hadn't spent it all. There were assets that could be sold and accounts that could be transferred back over. And I don't know whether it was like 80 cents or 50 cents on the dollar, but I think if after a scam you get half your money back, you're probably pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to lose half your money in cryptocurrency without even directly getting scammed. So
that's true. And so you talked about like these exit scams, at least in crypto, come when there's large drops in the market. So here it is. We're recording in late June, and there's been I think in the last week there's probably been across. Let's see, Bitcoin is down 30%, I think, or 50% in the last couple of weeks. A number of other currencies have seen sharp drops. Is that you seem to be indicating earlier that there is another exchange looking to be an exit scam?
I think there's actually been 2 exit scams since we've been airing this show, which is only 6 or 7 weeks. I can't remember when exit scam debuted, but right around when we debuted the show, a Turkish exchange called Thodex, the CEO made off with, I believe, $2 billion, was last seen at the Istanbul airport boarding a flight to Albania. And as far as I know, is still at large. I believe a number of members of his family have been arrested in Turkey. I don't know if that, I think some of them worked on the exchange, and also perhaps that's a tactic to get him to return to Turkey. But he's still out there. And then this week, now this is a story that, this is how it's being reported, and I'm suspicious of some of these figures, but there is what it's being reported is that a South African exchange called AfriCrypt, the two founders took off with $3.6 billion, which would make it the largest exit scam in history. And it gets crazier. They are 17 and 21 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And they have fled to the UK. I think they're believed to be in London. So I think they actually sent out a letter in April that said, hey, we've lost access to your money. We got hacked. Don't go to the authorities. We are trying to get the money back, but it's going to screw it up if people go to the authorities. Now, when I've read more about this story, it sounds to me more like a Ponzi scheme than an exchange. And I've seen some screen grabs of their app and how it worked. They're offering 10% daily returns.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
Just set off the sirens there. Actually, I believe they have 2 programs. There's a passive and an aggressive program. I believe the aggressive was 10% daily returns. So this set off all my alarms, because this is exactly the kind of stuff Gerald Cotton was doing when he was a teenager. In fact, literally around this age, he was running high yield investment programs. The idea that so in this case, often in a Ponzi scheme, you'll have inflated daily returns or monthly returns, and then an explanation of how these returns are generated. And in the case of AfriCrypt, it was that they were trading crypto using AI. And this is like a copy about AI, like copied off of a boilerplate. It's total gibberish. We developed, these are basically a kid who's saying in high school, I developed a proprietary AI trading method that's delivering 10% daily returns. So apparently a bunch of South African celebrities were involved in AfriCrypt. There was a fair amount of people referring other people, from what I've heard. It sounds like a giant Ponzi scheme going bust. And I wonder if the $3.6 billion is actually how much money they had, or how much money should have been there with people getting 10% daily returns and letting them compound, which very easily can go from, let's say, a couple $100 million into several billion. Like, that math snowballs very quickly. So it'll be interesting to see how much people actually had in it, if it was really billions. But either way, I mean, that's pretty wild story. And I don't think it's surprising that whatever they were doing culminated, during this crash. It tends to sort of shake out the weak stories that don't have enough money to keep paying. I mean, if they were actually paying people out 10% daily returns and anyone was withdrawing, that would take a lot of money out of the account pretty quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. And I think that makes sense. I had listened to an investor, and what he talked about. Now, this is for legitimate investing, not for scams, and this is not investment advice. But his general thought in the way that he viewed investing is the human mind is wired the opposite of what you should do. When prices go down, people panic, they've lost money. I'm going to get the rest of my money out so I don't lose the rest of it. And so you see these, when the cryptocurrencies drop, there's a run of people withdrawing their money, it forces the price down even lower, which causes it to crash even more. And in the case of if you're a platform that doesn't really actually have the money behind what you say it has, all of a sudden people are taking money out of your accounts that don't exist.
Yeah, and it's ironic because just holding cryptocurrency has been a pretty good bet through most of the time that cryptocurrency exists, and yet still people will accept an even greater degree of risk to go into these Ponzi schemes like AfriCrypt that pay even more than actual crypto returns. And that's kind of a theme. Like if I were to say sort of anything that unites all of these frauds, it's sort of the aspiration for otherworldly returns that leads people down these paths. Like there's actually pretty safe ways to buy and hold Bitcoin and Ethereum right now. I don't think Coinbase is going to exit scam you. They have like a publicly traded stock. It's just not worth it, I don't think. Yeah,
I mean, there are some legitimate companies that are real brick and mortar investment houses that you can now buy and sell crypto through. Now, maybe not the full range of options that you might have at other places, but they are legitimate, organizations that are backed by billions and billions of real dollars in the bank.
That's kind of like, I know that the like hardcore advice is like, oh, hold your own key, is hardware wallet. And I think that stuff's great. Like if you want to be like serious about holding serious amounts of crypto, I would do that. But in lieu of that, if you are going to hold money on an exchange or at least interact with an exchange, you kind of want to interact with an exchange that could cover your loss if they screw something up. Someone like Coinbase actually has enough money to, I mean, like not if they lose all of the coins they have, but if something goes wrong, it's just more in their interest to make it right than it is to take off if something goes wrong. And so, unfortunately, it is a form of centralization, but I think that if you deal with exchanges, actually like go with the biggest exchange. Now, of course, Quadriga contradicts this rule, so don't listen to me.
And that's, it's kind of funny because I think cryptocurrency and what's been going on with cryptocurrency since its inception, realistically, kind of violates a lot of the rules that I would normally give to people as my opinion about investments of like, if they're claiming you're going to make more than 10% a year, run for the hills. It's a scam. Well, I think Bitcoin was up 8% today. So maybe that 10% daily return doesn't sound so crazy if you're looking at a single day, but how could you do it day after day after day after day?
And it's also the difference between guaranteeing returns versus saying, hey, like if you stick in this, you'll probably do well over time. You'll also have a negative 50% month at some point, and you'll have to stomach that or as you said, it's all good advice except panic selling during crashes, which is the most human. It's human to Ponzi and it's human to panic sell,
and I could make the argument of, when you have, the concern is that coins can, or cryptocurrencies can run to zero. That there are circumstances where that can potentially happen.
I mean, I would say viewed over like a 10-year span, we should expect most cryptocurrencies to run zero. Just like if we looked at startups in 2010 and what is still alive right now, 90% plus of that ecosystem has to die every decade. Like most of these things are complete winner takes all markets. Like, I don't know, we're talking over Skype. How many dead startups did Skype and Zoom leave in their wake?
A ton.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I remember that when people would always have like weird off-brand like video chat, opportunities.
And now when people even talk about, what is it? Microsoft Teams, I think is what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's like, what's that? Microsoft, it's one of the biggest companies in the world. One of the most well-known names in software. You don't know their video chat platform, the one that they built as opposed to what they bought.
I mean, there are some echoes between like exchanges. Like, yeah, building a video platform is really hard. Like, whatever Skype and Zoom are doing to concurrently keep up, 8 million streams in HD, it's like, it's basically kind of what you want from like a crypto exchange or any company that's basically dealing with something that's extremely can't have any errors in it, has to work at 100% uptime and without any problems,
And has to deal with panic ups and panic downs.
And honestly, like that has been an issue in crypto, at the times when crypto is crashing, Coinbase has been down heavily, they like, you can't trade. And that's a big problem,
And that's the same thing that we saw with Robinhood a few months with a popular stock trading app, Robinhood in the US, is that when the market started dropping due to the pandemic and a few other times ups and downs, they've had a hard time keeping their platform operational. And of course, it always leads to the accusations of, well, you're doing it at the behest of large corporations to help manipulate the stock values.
I mean, this is, to me, why the most interesting thing happening in cryptocurrency is these DEXs, these decentralized exchanges that both often have like complete uptime all the time and in which there's no third party that you're working through. You're basically just using smart contracts to do transactions. And while that was a freaky idea a few years ago, now I think I would rather have a smart contract than like an exchange that may be being run by one guy,
Yeah. So what advice would you give, which is not financially, we're not offering financial advice here, but if someone's looking to use an exchange or looking to buy cryptocurrency, what are the things they should specifically be watching out for?
I mean, I think you want to go with like name brand exchanges that are large and can afford to pay you back. I would sort of watch out for exchanges that heavily incentivize signing up and give a lot of bonuses. People who are also heavily pushing like affiliates links for exchanges. All those are kind of red flags for me. It's kind of like, I look at it like something like your calendar. I'm like, okay, Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, some I've never heard of it calendar. That's not what I want to go with. Like I think there's a few name brand exchanges in most areas. And honestly, you kind of have to go with a sort of regional exchange now because there's very few exchanges that are like operating across, international borders legally, unless you're like VPNing, which just like this isn't investment advice. We won't give you use of VPN advice. But honestly, like for me, the most interesting world is this DeFi Ethereum world that doesn't really run on company-owned exchanges anymore. It runs on these kind of decentralized websites. And if you're curious about that stuff, I would check it out. It is actually an end run around a lot of the problems we're talking about, which are human problems. There's always a problem if you give people exposure to $1 billion that they could run out with. Like you'll see that it's not crypto. It's like any setting where that's the setup, you're going to have problems and people are going to start, succumbing to temptations. So ideally, you just don't want to put a bunch of your money in someone else's pocket. And then I think the other thing is, if you want to hold cryptocurrency in the long run, don't leave it on an exchange. Find either a hardware wallet or even, there's a lot of good wallets you can just keep on an iPhone. Put your Bitcoin, put your Ethereum into a third-party wallet. MetaMask is free for Ethereum stuff. And I think that's part of learning how it works, but it's also just like a good move. You can always put it right back on the exchange. A send is very cheap. So, you're basically just emailing yourself money from your like built-in account to your own personal account in a way.
And then if you go with the public advice from Quadriga, is make sure the password is written down somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I tell your loved one, yeah, this is actually a real thing, which is like, if you have a will, if you have a succession plan, you have a lot of assets in cryptocurrency somewhere. You should probably like have a plan for it, because this is starting to happen,
Yep.
where people have millions of dollars in crypto and don't tell their partner or their kids or whatever how to access it. So I don't know, like my hardware wallet comes with like 3 little custom pieces of paper where you write down the seed phrase. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like the ultimate, like, I don't remember when they used to have like phones that had like your 10 speed dial. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you got 3 options for here, is there 2 people that you would want to sort of trust with it, or hiding at 2 places and giving one to someone else? I mean, it's terrible OPSEC to give it to someone else, honestly. I don't even know why I would endorse that. You probably shouldn't give it to anyone else, but maybe tell them where you've got it hidden if you might not be making it too many more years.
And then I guess the other option is make sure. I know there was a case in the news about a gentleman who accidentally threw away a Bitcoin wallet worth $70 million at the time, I think.
Don't do that.
And he was paying people like, I think he was offering like $1 million bounty to whoever who could find the wallet in the dump.
I mean, there's only going to be more stories of all of these kinds going forward. So be careful, I guess I would say. And, don't put in so much money that you're going to have to like look through a dump at some point in the future.
What's the advice? Don't put all your eggs in the same basket.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing that some people do is, spread your crypto out over like a bunch of different wallets. And then it's like, okay, like something happens to one of these, it's not like catastrophic, I think that's actually a pretty smart strategy that some people use.
Yep. And probably the other advice is, if you can't afford to lose the money, you should be involved in crypto.
Yeah. And I would say it's like generally a kind of experimental atmosphere that like, you don't need to do it, like if you feel like engaging in it, check it out. But like, I don't feel like people like need to be drawn into something that is inherently risky. And when I say it's inherently risky, I don't even mean the price. I mean, the whole thing is inherently slightly risky. It's kind of one of the things that makes it interesting and makes crazy stories like this, but it also makes it precarious if you've got money that's important to you in it,
Yeah, that's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. So how many episodes of your podcast are you planning on putting out?
There are 8 episodes. The last episode comes out Monday, chapter 8. So it's a great time to start binging. You can find it at exitscam.show or just search for Exit Scam on the podcast app of your choice.
And do you have Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn if people want to get a hold of you and learn more about it? Or are you social media agnostic?
No, I'm at Aaron Lammer, AARONLAMMER. I usually tweet out all of my various podcasts. So you can follow all the weird stuff I get into there.
That'll be awesome. We'll definitely make sure to link to all your social media accounts, link to your podcast. I've started listening, and you are a great storyteller. And I love just hearing these stories, these kind of true life stories of things that just go really, really wrong.
Totally.
Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Prey podcast. If something from this episode stood out as memorable or actionable, leave a comment as a podcast review by visiting easyprey.com/review. Notes and a transcript of this episode with Aaron Lammer can be found at easyprey.com/70.